What's up, you YouTubers? It's Hoppy89 and the voices in my head coming at you from the Duelist Den. And for today's Archetype breakdown, we are going over the Amazonas Archetype. Now, the reason I'm going over the Amazonas Archetype is because, as I'm sure you've guessed, the Wonder Woman movie was released this past weekend in theaters. Now, I'm super excited. I'm going to see the movie this weekend, so please don't spoil the movie for me. But anyway, I wanted to do an archetype that kind of went in alignment with Wonder Woman, and I thought, what better archetype to choose than an archetype that was based off of the same mythology as Wonder Woman? Now, the mythology they're based off of is the Greek legends of the Amazon warriors. And the Amazon warriors was a race of people who were entirely female. Now, I'm sure that, they had males in their society. I mean, they had to have kids, but, their society was mainly matriarchal, which means it was woman-ruled, and things like that. Now, the Amazons were considered some of the best warriors of their time, at least according to the legends. And Wonder Woman herself sort of lives up to that legend, as in the DC universe, there are times where her powers and abilities rival even that of Superman. Now, as far as the Amazonas Archetype, they are some very powerful cards. Now, obviously for today's meta, not so much, but when they were first released way back in the day, they were a very good archetype. Their monsters' base attacks were average, but they did have abilities that allowed them to protect each other and boost each other in strength or abilities. Now, the archetype is consistent of Earth attribute monsters only, and with the exception of Liger and Tiger, they are mainly warrior types, and with Liger and Tiger being beast types. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start the video and hit that intro. First up, we have Amazonas Scouts. Now, this monster is a level 2 with 500 attack and 1100 defense, and the effect states that during either player's turn, you contribute this card, and this turn face up Amazonas monsters you currently control, cannot be targeted by monster effects, and cannot be destroyed by card effects. Now, although the stats on this card are not very powerful, and its level is pretty low, it is, in my opinion, one of the quintessential cards for the deck, as it gives you an all-around protection for your Amazons. Granted, they can still be destroyed by battle, but as far as card effects, it is all-around protection. And in addition to that, you can use the effect during either player's turn. So even if your opponent, tries to negate its effect, you can just chain Amazon Scout's ability to whatever card they might be trying to use. Next up is Amazonas Spy. Now, Amazonas Spy is OCG only, but I do have the translation. It is a level 3 monster with 800 attack, 1200 defense, and the effect states that you can reveal one other Amazonas monster in your hand to special summon this card from your hand. You can only use this effect of Amazonas Spy once per turn, and when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can target one Amazonas monster in your graveyard except Amazonas Spy and add it to your hand or shuffle it into the deck. Now, the summoning effect is very good, as the only cost is that you have to reveal an Amazon or an Amazonas monster from your hand, and if it's destroyed by battle, it gives you recursion as well. Now, its effect doesn't activate if it's destroyed by a card effect, but it does still give you options, as some Amazon cards require them to be in your hand, others require Amazons to be in your deck. So this does give you options for whatever cards you might have in play, or whatever cards you might be about to play during your turn. Now we've come to Amazonas BLOWPIPER. BLOWPIPER is a level 3 with 800 attack and 1500 defense, and the effect states that you can select one face-up monster your opponent controls, and during each of your standby phases it loses 500 attack until the end of this turn. Now, this is really one of the weaker of the Amazons, not only in attack but in ability as well. It does give you the ability to reduce an opponent's monster by just a little bit, that one of your other cards can get over it as far as attack, but that your opponent's monster does gain that attack back during the end phase. So if they have a bunch of boost effects on it, this effect isn't really very viable, and with it being a level 3, you can't really go into a lot of rank 4 plays, which this deck does a lot of. So honestly, I wouldn't run this card in an Amazoness deck, but back in the day, this card was very good as, you know, a lot of monsters, you know, they didn't have all this crazy special summoning or unbreakable board shit, you know. Your opponent would summon a monster, you would summon a monster, then this effect would actually be very good at that point. So today, this card isn't really all that great, but back in the day, it actually did have its uses. Coming in next on our list is, of course, Amazoness Tiger. Now, Amazoness Tiger is arguably the best of the Amazoness main deck monsters. It is a level 4 with a base attack and defense of 1100 and 1500 respectively, and the effect states that you can only control one Amazoness Tiger, and this card gains 400 attack for each Amazoness monster you control, and your opponent cannot target any face-up Amazon or Amazoness monsters except this one. Now, back in the day, Amazons did have a bunch of special summoning abilities and other ways you could summon Amazoness monsters out to the field. They did utilize anti-attack cards, so you were able to get a bunch of Amazoness monsters on the field, including Amazoness Tiger. And once you had a field full of Amazoness monsters, this card could get up to a 3,500 attack point stat. And even today, you know, 3,500 attack points is nothing to laugh at. And as long as you have Tiger on the field with that 3,500 attack points, you know, your opponent can't attack any other Amazon or Amazoness monster except Tiger, so you've pretty much got your field safe from anything except for board wipes. And if you have Amazoness Scouts out on the field, well, you know what, your Tiger's going to be safe from that as well. Amazoness Sage is next up, and it is a level 4 with 1,400 attack and 700 defense. And the effect states that at the end of the damage step, if this card attacked and is still on the field, target one spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy that target. Now, just with its base attack, you know, odds are that you're not going to be able to attack over anything your opponent has. So you're going to want to find ways to boost Sage's attack with cards like Solidarity or Equip Spells or something like that, so it can get over your opponent's monsters and use its effect. Now, these days, that's easier said than done, but back in the day, when, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh was a lot simpler and we didn't have all these crazy summoning mechanics, this effect was pretty good because you could easily attack over a monster your opponent normal summoned with just one equip spell or with one boost effect or something like that, and then you blow up one of their spell or trap cards. Not one of my favorites, but Amazoness Archer is part of the Amazoness archetype. Now, when this card was first printed, its name was Amazon Archer, and it later got its name changed to Amazoness Archer, so it was a part of the Amazoness archetype. And it is a level 4 with 1,400 attack and 1,000 defense, and the effect states that you contribute 2 monsters to inflict 1,200 damage to your opponent. Now, I really don't care for this effect because even back in the day, getting rid of 2 of your own Amazoness monsters was not really a smart idea, so this was not seen in a lot of Amazoness builds. Amazoness Chainmaster, one of my favorite of the Amazoness cards, is a level 4 with 1,500 attack and 1,300 defense, and the effect states that when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you pay 1,500 life points to look at your opponent's hand, then add 1 monster from their hand to your hand. Now, I'm a big fan of taking my opponent's shit, so this effect really stood out to me. Now, I don't much care for the 1,500 life point cost, but you could potentially get your opponent's boss monster with this effect and then use it to your advantage. Next up, we have Amazoness Fighter. Now, in my opinion, Amazoness Fighter is on steroids or some shit, or maybe she is not really a she and she is a dude pretending to be a she. I don't fucking know, but she's on something. But anyway, Fighter is a level 4 with 1,500 attack and 1,300 defense, and the effect states you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. Plain, simple, to the point. Now, I found the best way to utilize this card is with something like Mist Body, which prevents the monster from being destroyed by battle. In addition, with some other card that has an effect that triggers if your monster is still on the field after battles. But outside of, you know, the no battle damage, she's not really good for anything outside of rank 4 fodder. One of the more attractive looking of the Amazoness monsters is Amazoness Trainee. Now, the reason I say that is because she looks like my fiance in a bit. You know, if my fiance had darker skin and a different hair color. But outside of that, She looks extremely similar to my fiance. But anyway, Trainee is a level 4 with 1500 attack and 1300 defense, and the effect states that monsters destroyed by battle with this card are returned to the bottom of the deck instead of going to the graveyard, and if this card destroys a monster by battle, it gains 200 attack. Now this card was really good back in the day because, you know, we had cards like the zombie cards and things like that that could be recursed from the graveyard. So if you're going up against a zombie-based deck or a graveyard recursion-based deck, this card could essentially shut it down, and every time it destroyed a monster by battle, it got a nice little attack boost. Now 200 attack may not seem like a lot, but accumulated over time, it did really add up. And back in the day when this archetype was around, a duel didn't last, you know, your turn, your opponent's turn, your turn, your opponent's turn, and then the game was over. I mean, it was actually a drawn-out game that took a while and some strategy to actually, you know, build some momentum. Next up, we have Amazoness Swordswoman. This is another one of my favorite cards in this archetype, and the reason is because of its effect. Now, its attack is 1500, its defense is 1600, but the effect is really where it comes into play, and that effect is that your opponent takes all battle damage that you would have taken from a battle involving this card. Now, combined with cards such as Mist Body and similar things that prevent your monsters from being destroyed by battle, this card can really do some major damage. For example, say your opponent has a nice little 3000 beat stick monster on the field. You have this on the field with Mist Body. Well, this card's not going to be destroyed by battle because of Mist Body, and your opponent's going to be taking 1500 damage every time you attack their own monster. So it allows you to use your opponent's monsters against them, and that is something that I am, of course, like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of doing shit like that, just because, you know, I'm an asshole. For the last of the level 4s, we have Amazoness Paladin. Paladin has 1700 attack and 300 defense, and the effect states that this card gains 100 attack for each Amazoness monster you control. Now, at most, that's additional 500 attack points, bringing it up to 2200 attack, but for a level 4 with 2200 attack, that's still a pretty decent attack. But this is just essentially a weaker version of Amazoness Tiger, so personally, I would rather run the Tiger over Paladin, but Paladin still does have its uses. And back in the old school version of Yu-Gi-Oh! When it was first released and whatnot, you know, 1700 attack for a level 4 was a pretty good attack, and having the ability to gain that 100 attack for each Amazoness just made it so much better, especially back in the old days. For the final main deck monster, we have Amazoness Queen. Amazoness Queen is a level 6 with 2400 attack and 1800 defense, and the effect states that Amazoness monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. Now, this combined with stuff like Amazoness Fighter and Amazoness Swordswoman was very, very powerful. Now, those other cards I mentioned using Mist Body, and that's mainly because Amazoness Queen is a level 6 and does require a tribute to bring out. So Mist Body does give you the ability to get around the tribute summon effect. But if you do have an Amazoness Queen, or you have an effective way of getting Queen on the field, then you don't really need the Mist Body. Now, Queen mixed with Scouts is very, very powerful, as Scouts prevents your monsters from being destroyed by card effects, and Queen prevents them from being destroyed by battle. So it is a very, very powerful combo. Next up, we have Amazoness Pet Liger. Now, personally, I think making this a fucking fusion monster was just plumb retarded, because fusions and Amazoness, not really such a great idea. I personally think they should have made it an Xyz monster, but, you know, that's just my opinion. And yes, this is a relatively new card. It was just released, just a few weeks back in the OCG, so they could have very well made this an Xyz monster and gotten around the whole fusion summon issue. But anyway, Pet Liger is a level 7 beast type with 2500 attack and 2400 defense. It requires Amazoness Tiger plus 1 Amazoness monster. The effect states that if this card attacks during damage calculation, you can make this card gain 500 attack during damage calculation only. And if an Amazoness monster you control attacks an opponent's monster, after damage calculation, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. It loses 800 attack, and monsters your opponent controls cannot attack Amazoness monsters except this one. So if you have Tiger and Liger both out on the field, or if you have two Ligers out on the field, you've got it set up to where your opponent just can't attack you at all, and you've got a pretty powerful field to boot. For the final card, or monster card I should say, in the archetype, we have Amazoness Empress. Again, this is an OCG card, and again, it's a fucking fusion monster. I mean, they could have easily made this a fucking Xyz or, you know, made it a synchro monster and then gave them their own tuner or something, but whatever, you know, Konami doesn't always make the best decisions. But anyway, Empress is a level 8 with 2800 attack and 2400 defense. It requires Amazoness Queen plus 1 Amazoness monster, and other Amazoness cards you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. So it's essentially a beefed up version of Amazoness Queen. And if an Amazoness monster you control attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. And if this face-up fusion summoned card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, while its owner controls it, you can special summon 1 Amazoness Queen from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So this gives you a way to easily special summon your queen, which is something I mentioned would be a good idea earlier. And it doesn't have to be destroyed by a card effect for the effect to go off. Your opponent could use Compulsory Evacuation Device, or they could banish it, or they could return it to your deck. Either way, its effect will go off and you get to special summon Queen. Now, I did just think of this. If you are running some sort of pendulum build for this, you could use Performer Pal Trump Witch, for example, which has the ability that lets you fusion summon monsters if it's active in your pendulum zone. So I guess that's one way you could get around running polymerization in this deck. Starting off the spell cards, we have Amazoness Spellcaster. This is a normal spell, and the effect states that you target 1 Amazoness monster you control and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Switch the original attacks of those targets until the end of this turn. Now this is a very, very powerful card, as if your opponent has a big old fucking beater on the field and you have some little weak ass Amazoness on the field, like one of the weaker ones, you could switch their attacks and then get over the stronger monster. Next is Amazoness Heirloom. This is an equipped spell, and it states that you can only equip it to an Amazoness monster, and once per turn that monster cannot be destroyed by battle. When the equipped monster attacks after damage calculation, destroy the attack target. Now, I would still suggest running Mist Body over this, because Heirloom states that it's only once per turn, it can't be destroyed by battle, whereas Mist Body is permanent, you know, anytime it battles and want to be destroyed. But still, this is a pretty good effect, as a lot of your Amazon monsters do have effects that require them to stay on the field for use, such as Amazoness Fighter or Swordswoman, for example. So this is still a pretty good card to run in the deck. Next up, we have Amazoness Fighting Spirit. Now, Fighting Spirit is a continuous spell card, and it's pretty much the skyscraper for the deck. The effect states that if an Amazoness monster attacks a monster with higher attack, the attacking monster gains 1000 attack during damage calculation only. And so this allows your weaker Amazon monsters to get over some bigger beat sticks your opponent may have on the field. For the final spell card, we have Amazoness Village. This is the field spell of the deck, and it states that all Amazoness monsters gain 200 attack, and once per turn when an Amazoness monster is destroyed by battle or by card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Amazoness monster from your deck with a level less than or equal to the Amazoness monster in the graveyard. So say your opponent destroys something like Amazoness Fighter. Well, as soon as Amazoness Fighter is destroyed, you bring out your Amazoness Tiger. As long as you've got several other Amazoness monsters on the field, that Tiger's going to get its boost, and that's the only monster they can attack. So this card is very, very powerful and very, very dangerous, and it can be a huge detriment to your opponent. Starting off the trap lineup, we have Amazoness Archers. Not to be confused with Amazoness Archer, there is an extra letter at the end of this name. But anyway, it's a normal trap, and the effect states that you can activate only when your opponent declares an attack while you control an Amazoness monster, and all monsters your opponent controls are changed to face-up attack position, flip effects are not activated, and they lose 500 attack as long as they remain face-up on the field. In addition to that, your opponent must attack with all of their monsters. So ideally, you want to use this card when you've got a fully powered Tiger or a fully powered Liger on the field, and pretty much force them to attack your Tiger or Liger and deal damage to themselves via the attacks. Amazoness Shamanism is one of the more tricky trap cards of the archetype. The effect states that you destroy all face-up Amazoness monsters you control, then you can special summon any number of level 4 or lower Amazoness monsters from your graveyard in face-up defense position, up to the number of monsters destroyed by this effect. Now, ideally, what you want to do is wait till late game to use this, when, like, say they field wiped all of your Tigers or something, just to get those Tigers back out to the field. But personally, I wouldn't run this card in the deck, at least not at full copies. I'd run maybe 2 at most, or hell, maybe even 1. But it works similar to Harpy's Hunting Ground in my opinion. It's a way to get Amazoness monsters you need from your graveyard back out to the field. So it is very powerful. You just have to be careful about how you use it. Dramatic Rescue, one of my favorite all-time cards in the game that's ever been censored, merely because I like the original artwork for the card. But anyway, Dramatic Rescue states that you can only activate this card when a card is activated that targets an Amazoness monster. Return the targeted monster to its owner's hand and special summon one other monster from your hand. Now, back in the day, targeting effects were very common. These days, you have effects that can get around the targeting issue. But back when this card was first released, targeting effects were a big thing. So this allows you to essentially force your opponent to waste a targeting effect on one of your Amazoness monsters. The last of the normal traps is Queen's Pawn. This effect states that you can activate only when an Amazoness monster you control destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. Special summon one level 4 or lower Amazoness monster from your deck. This card is very, very powerful because if you destroy an opponent's monster by battle, you get a search and special summon all off the same effect. So if you can get over one of your opponent's lower attack monsters, you use this card to bring out your tiger, and you just pretty much start going off. Another new card just recently released in the OCG is Amazoness Ambush. This is a continuous trap, and the effect states that once per turn during the battle phase, you can special summon one Amazoness monster from your hand, and if you do, it gains 500 attack until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. If your Amazoness monster battles an opponent's monster after damage calculation, you can banish that opponent's monster. Now, I like that effect because it says you can banish, which, more times than not, you're obviously going to do so. But anyway, it continues. If this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one Amazoness monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So it gets a special summon during every battle phase, and if your opponent does manage to destroy this card, you get to special summon an Amazoness monster from your graveyard. For the final card of the archetype, we have Amazoness Willpower. This is a continuous trap, and it states that you select one Amazoness monster in your graveyard and special summon it in attack position. It cannot change its battle position and must attack if able. When this card is removed from the field, destroy that monster. When that monster is destroyed, destroy this card. Now, I personally don't like this card, and I would never run it in an Amazoness deck. Here's why. Because it essentially does what Call of the Haunted does, only it puts you at a bit of a disadvantage because A, you can't change the monster's battle position, whereas with Call of the Haunted you can, and B, it forces your Amazoness monster to attack. So unless you tribute it or use it for an Xyz or Synchro Summon or something like that, you may potentially be forced to attack into a stronger monster. Now, if you use something like Amazoness Sword Fighter or Amazoness Fighter, that may not be such a big deal. Or if you have Amazoness Queen on the field where it can't be destroyed by battle, something like that, yeah, it could be very good, but I would still just prefer to run the 3 Call of the Haunteds over Willpower, just because Willpower can put you at a disadvantage. I do have one honorable mention for this archetype, and that is the Unfriendly Amazon. It has not had an errata to make it part of the Amazoness archetype. I think Konami should do that. And I'm not going to get into this card right now because I'm going to do a card discussion over it later on this week. So stay tuned for that. But as always, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments in the section below. And make sure you tell your friends, family, everybody you know who enjoys Yu-Gi-Oh! Or likes watching YouTubers about this channel to get on here and subscribe to the channel. Because on July 4th, I will be doing a Maximum Crisis pack giveaway where I will be giving away 5 packs of Maximum Crisis, but only if I get up to 100 subscribers by July 4th. So get everyone you know on here, subscribe to the channel. You want to have those secondary accounts subscribe to my channel? I don't care. As long as my subscriber count is at 100 by July 4th, then I will be doing that Maximum Crisis pack giveaway. But until next time, this is Hobby Hunter 89 and the voices in my head, signing off.
Take a shot at me, running side by side. It's a blur as I go by. I can hear you breathing. I can see you coming. I can feel the wind that's blowing me around. See the sun arising.